Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Merkel, editorial director of Art Week Tokyo. It's wonderful to see such a great turnout for this talk. Art Week Tokyo was established in 2021 as a citywide initiative for activating the art ecosystem in Tokyo and reinforcing the city's connections to the regional and international art scenes. The event is held across 4 days every November and connects 50 of the city's leading museums, galleries, and art spaces across coordinated programming. We also organize special platforms, including our curated sales platform, AWT Focus, our talk series, and the AWT Bar, which invites an emerging architect to design a space where we serve artist cocktails and special food creations. As you know, Art Week Tokyo is organized in collaboration with Art Basel, and here in Hong Kong we are deepening our relationship by organizing several activations over the course of the fair. Today's talk is one of those activations. We also have curated tours of Tokyo galleries at the fair and a pop-up edition of AWT Bar at Ronin in Central. We are thrilled to have two of the most important artists of Japanese contemporary art in recent years with us to speak on the topic Tokyo as Studio. I'll briefly introduce the speakers. Takashi Murakami was born in Tokyo in 1962 and holds a PhD in Nihonga from Tokyo University of the Arts. He is one of today's most recognizable artists, known for introducing his superflat theory of contemporary visual culture to the world. In addition to exhibiting at important venues, including the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, the Palace of Versailles in France, and Taekwon Contemporary here in Hong Kong, his art can be seen everywhere from fashion apparel to album covers, music videos, and skateboard decks, as well as buses. His work is currently on view in a major new exhibition, Takashi Murakami Mononoke Kyoto, which continues at the Kyoto City Kyocera Museum of Art through September 1 of this year, and he's opening another exhibition, Hiroshige's 100 Famous Views of Edo, featuring Takashi Murakami at the Brooklyn Museum in New York, which runs from April 5 to August 4. Shinro Otake was born in Tokyo in 1955 and has been active as an artist since the late 1970s. He has inspired multiple generations of Japanese artists with his practice of working with what's already there, which he applies to everything from collages and assemblages to mixed media paintings and kinetic sound sculptures, as well as his signature scrapbooks. Otake has participated in major exhibitions of international art, including the first Asia-Pacific Triennial, the 8th Gwangju Biennale, the 55th Venice Biennale, and Documenta 13. He is the recipient of this year's 65th Mainichi Art Award in recognition of his retrospective Shinro Otake, which opened in late 2022 at the National Museum of Modern Art Tokyo and traveled to multiple venues in Japan over the past year. Murakami-san, Otake-san, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I think the theme of the talk is relatively self-explanatory. I would just say that there are probably no better artists we could ask to talk about Tokyo as Studio than Murakami-san and Otake-san. Murakami-san, I believe your art has really helped shape the international image of Tokyo and its culture over the past 2 decades and more. And Otake-san, you have a very embodied and physical relationship with the city and its urban space that goes back to your childhood in post-war Tokyo. I'd also say that I think both of you are indicative of how Tokyo is a global city that produces a culture that is informed by connections with other cities and cultures across the world, including here in Hong Kong. We'll get into that over the course of the talk, but since you were both born and raised in Tokyo, I thought we could just start by talking about how the city shapes your artistic vision. What parts of the city have inspired you, and what parts of the city have you pushed back against in building up your artistic practices?
Yeah, hi, this is Takashi. Yes, the Otake Shinro-san is one of my kind of before the debut. So I saw his show, and then I decided I want to go into the contemporary artist, and almost 2 years I'd been copying for his work. So, and then one day he came to our university. He walked around, and then I was, asking for him, "Hey, Mr. Otake-san, so can I talking a little bit?" And he's very kind. "Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So, but okay. So you are what you doing?" So looks like very nice conversation, and then I became to the artist maybe. So, but the main thing is he said the Tokyo stuff. But honestly, I'm not Tokyo image. But he was doing for his art something is very linked with Japanese strongest the economy, the bubble economy, the zone. That means like he was doing with kind of I don't know like my image was he's very good well to connection with Japanese money, but he said no. But exactly the kind of the my generation and his generation is this is a very big gap. His generation was on time to the bubble economy stuff. Mean like the Japanese people having a confidence, like a first time to the getting confidence after the lose World War II. So and then so my generation is economy was crushed, and then everybody to depressing. So and then we have to find out our way, and then myself is I have to escape from the Japan. So that means like I cannot tell to the Tokyo something style of thing, but maybe much better than me to the Otake-san to talking about the Tokyo stuff.
そうですね。だから今のなんていうかな、そのバブルっていうかな、その村上さんの世代、7つ彼の方が下っていうかななんですけど、僕自身はやっぱりそのバブル期にバブルの経験をしたことが逆に何もないっていうかね。だから時代的にはそういうふうに東京がすごくこう景気のいい頃だったっていうんだけども、もう本当にどこがですかっていう30前後のね東京に、20代の頃もそうなんだけど、自分自身はなんていうかな、1963年に初めてアストロボーイって鉄腕アトムがテレビアニメ放映になった世代っていうかね。だから鉄腕アトムがテレビで放映になる1回目はテレビジョンの前で正座して見たのを覚えてんだよね。だから僕がやっぱ子供時代を送ったのは昭和30年代っていう、1955年から65年ぐらいですか。その時代っていうのは子供にとって憧れの職業は野球選手、プロレスラー、漫画家みたいなね。だから僕はやっぱ小学校上がる前に漫画家になろうと思ってたんですね。だけど全然その才能がないことに気づいて、もうすぐに挫折し8ページ書いて挫折したのを覚えてます。だから結構その東京とかっていうのは意識したことは全然なかったんだけど、青春時代はよく後から考えると映画館に一番影響を受けたのかなっていうかね、映画をすごく10代の20歳前後の頃よく見てたっていう記憶があります。
Otake-san, you talked about growing up in post-war Tokyo prior to the Olympics, where there was a lot of construction going on, and I think things were also kind of freer. I remember you also talk about going over to Tezuka Osamu's production studio and receiving animation cells from his animators. So maybe that was also a period of time when it was much freer.
そうね。 そうなんですよね。だから手塚さんあの頃はもう個人情報誰でも俺だから漫画の描き方って本の後ろに漫画家の住所と電話番号全部載ってて、小学校の頃は要するに今週は誰と誰をしに行こうっつってね、いきなり行くんだよね子供がね。だけどなんか漫画家の人がみんな優しくていきなり玄関に行っても、まあ、千葉哲也先生とか、まあ、いろいろ憧れの人がいてサインを快くくれたり、手塚治虫さんのスタジオに行った時はやっぱ大人がアニメーションの使ったセル画を使用済みのセル画を全部子供にね10枚ずつぐらいくれてたりね。一回だから手塚治虫さん塀に登って手塚治虫さんの自宅見たら水まきしてて、その後なんか家に招き入れてくれてショートケーキと紅茶をご馳走されたっていう。でもその記憶は飛んでんだけども、一緒に行った友達に教えてもらって、だからそういうような結構穏やかな大人が多かったなっていうね、後から考えるとすごいありがたかったかなと思いますね。
Murakami-san, you were just talking about the bubble era, and you actually curated an exhibition of works from your collection, which you titled Bubble Wrap. So I think the bubble is an important period for you and how you understand also art history. Could you talk a bit more about your experiences during that time?
Okay, the Otake-san's position at the moment was very original, I can say now, because the art is what the Japanese art people couldn't understanding. That's why graffiti art is graffiti. It's a graphic art, not graffiti. Like that's why the design thing and product thing is everything can say art. So that's why the Otake-san's position in the people like me, anybody to recognize to this is art piece because doesn't fit with commercial something. So and then bubble wrap, my theme is at the moment was very strong power has a Seibu company. It's this conglomerate, the kind of department store and it's kind of real estate and exactly the kind of the train business. The guy, this guy's the Tsutsumi family having pray for the like a real estate, like a hotel business and everything, and then they have a huge amount of money, and they pay for the each artist and making for some competition. But at the moment, my feeling was the fact to me, but because too many pay for the money, and also this is confusing. So, but at the same time, at the moment, this 15 years. So the Seibu companies pay for the huge amount of money for the young artists. That's why. So we understanding what what is a creative condition. So like in Roppongi now is Roppongi Hills, the area have a wave, the kind of the subculture department store. And the underground has like kind of independent movie theater. So like the bubble economy thing is it's kind of the like us, the seed artist can grow the using for these money stuff. So but now. So nobody wants to talking about this the era because the Japanese people are very, how can I say, disappointed. Like a bubble economy is not own culture or own structure for making for the money. So that's why nobody to talking about this thing. That's why I want to making for the revival about this era then I editing for the title is a bubble wrap. But Otake-san is just one people, one artist to the star of the independent, the standing position.
I was actually at Nakano Broadway recently, which is the mecca of otaku culture in Japan. It's an old shopping center with small shops that sell old figurines, old animation cells. And of course, Murakami-san has a number of shops in Nakano Broadway, including a cafe, a shop selling Kaikai Kiki merchandise, a gallery, and offices. But as I was walking through that space, I was actually looking at the displays and how there are all these figurines kind of put on the shelves in these miniature assemblages full of tremendous details, colors. And I thought maybe this is a kind of connecting point between Otake's art, which is full of found imagery that he collects from different sources and weaves into collages and assemblages, and Murakami's approach to composition, which is also hyper detailed and exploding with different bursts of color and narratives. So I wonder if the two of you could, would agree with that statement or talk about it.
そうね。だからまあなんかなんていうかな、要するにブロードウェイってね、なかなかあそこに入った人じゃないとイメージが伝わりにくいと思うんだけど、まあ非常になんかこう昭和っぽいレトロっぽい感じとなんかオタクっぽいとこがぐちゃぐちゃになってね、迷路のような建物なんですけど、まあなんかそれはなんかすごくね、結構共通のものっていうのはすごくまあアンドリューが思うっていうのはなるほどなと思ったんですけどね。なんか。
I mean, but you work with vernacular culture. You're picking up images that are not high art. It's kind of considered consumable images or throwaway imagery that you collect. And so maybe, although figures are one element of that, I think I see a connection between that image culture of otaku and some of the other sources that you work with.
まああんまり関係ないかな、僕の場合は。だからまあ面白いとは思うんだけども、それにこう影響を受けるほどのものがあったかっていうとそれはなかったかもしれないですね。まあなんか後でまたね話に二重重複しちゃうかもしれないけども、やっぱ自分自身は東京で生まれ育って高校卒業して北海道に牧場に働きに行ったりね、なんかとにかく東京が嫌だったっていうかな、なんかこう自分の場所じゃないっていう思いが常にあって、だから自分の場所探しをしてた感じですよね。だからそれで北海道っていうところから帰ってきて、今度はロンドンに行って、ロンドンから帰ってきて今度は香港に、ロンドンに初めて行った時にスクラップブックのきっかけがあって、まあ路上のゴミを貼り出したっていうかね、ノートに。それでその2年後に帰ってきた2年後に偶然フリーチケットを香港のツアーチケットをもらって2泊3日の、それで香港に来た時に、まあ、衝撃を受けた場所がやっぱ香港でね、その当時のそれは79だからだいぶ前のことなんですけど、まあだから香港に初めて来た時になんかここが自分の場所だなっていうかね、だからロンドンで貼るっていうことに気がついて、まあ、その後なんかそれをこう貼るってことをもっとこうなんか血肉化していくっていうかな、なんかもっとそれを自分のものにしていくためにすごくこうインスパイアされた場所が香港ですよね。だからそれはやっぱり今回も5年ぶりに来たんだけども、やっぱ香港っていうのはやっぱりすごくこう ね、だいぶ様変わりはしたんですけど、やっぱそういった昔のそういったそのクリエーションに結びつくパワーみたいなのはやっぱり未だに感じますけどね。
Murakami-san, do you see any connection with the vernacular imagery in Nakano Broadway and your own art, or any connection between your art and Otake-san's art through this use of vernacular imagery?
Me and Otake-san, the 7 years different, but this distance is a very big gap, because he said Osamu Tezuka is the one of the manga artists, but he is kind of the very starting point guy. So, but the otaku people, otaku generation is like kind of the 2 or 3 generations late, and also the like. So Otake-san's talking about a very pure creative thing, but the otaku culture is a very strange and embarrassing eroticism, right? So and like a big breast and kind of the anytime to the very strange thing, and it's kind of the very very embarrassing culture is Japanese anime and like game culture, but we grow and we breathing for this culture. That's why. So we have a proud about that. But in general culture, say geek people is like very embarrassing. So that counter feeling has otaku people. It's Nakano Broadway. The generation is me or more a little bit, the kind of between the Otake-san and me, the generation people to create it. So it's right now is the otaku or geek me is not bad information, not like a impression, but so our generation is exactly very bad, because one of the very famous murder is Tsutomu Miyazaki, the guy who killed for the the kind of very small ladies like children. So that guy's room is so many videotape and so many like kind of the otaku posters. So and then one day is in a television and a newspaper having his room picture. So and then so my parents is very fear about oh my God, my son is same room as. So kind of that movement. So that's why still until now the Nakano Broadway has a very creepy feeling. But that's why I'm very comfortable to breathing inside this area. So that's why I have several store and cafe or something. So and then when I came to this area, like very relaxed, comfortable.
Otake-san was just talking about how he had formative experiences in London and Hong Kong. Murakami-san, I understand that you went to New York. It was when you were in New York that you really understood how you wanted to integrate so-called otaku culture into your artwork. Could you talk a bit about that experience?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. Why so I have to go to the New York City is I have to escape from the Japanese art scene, art market. It means like and the museum industry also. The Japanese museum industry is super poor. So because after the bubble economic crash, so no money. No money mean exactly no money. So and then when the museum to invite me, they need okay, Takashi-san, so please making for this big 2-room to the making for the nice installation, and okay, how much the budget? That they said looks like a big room looks like that 2 rooms. Oh, okay. So we can pay for the like $500 $5 or something like that. It's, oh my God, this is just, back and forth to the truck. Rental fee is much more. So it cannot do that. And then, but the museum people said, everybody did that. Why not? You can do that. And then, sorry, I cannot do that. And then I escaped for that to New York City. And then I was running in what is a New York sale rate to debut for that. So, and then I got the money from the Asian Cultural Council to making for the test. That this is a grantee is fantastic chance. Asian Cultural Council to give me the money, and I give to the PS1 Museum Studio Visit Project, and then I got 1 year of a small studio in New York, and I can breathing very naturally to what is a real New York art, and then step by step I was running, and can fit with a New York something, but same time I have no connection with the Japanese something, so until now I have no connection. Just Mori Museum, these guys is very special. So, and also the Fumio Nanjo. So this guy, the curator, so he found maybe like Otake-san and me, like these very sophisticated curator, the independent curator who ran from the maybe European something. That guy, pick it up to the any chance to and give to me or any artist. So I got the chance for the Mori Museum something, but the other chance is very few. For example, MOT, like a Tokyo Contemporary Art Museum show, I had a big show, but why I got the chance is Mariko Mori canceled. And then, hey Takashi, so we have no time, just as performances. You can bearable? I have no choice. So looks like that my position, like a standing position in Japan, is super bad. But looks like that. Otake-san, like backstage, like I talking with Otake-san, he said, "Oh, I'm not, good position." But it looks like that. I don't know.
I'd like to talk a bit about how you both engage with the city. Otake-san, I know that you often walk around urban space, not just in Tokyo, but pretty much anywhere you go, and you look for signs or presences, things that speak to you about the forgotten time that you can find in the city. So I wonder whether you think of this as your practice as a way of reading urban space, and also how you approach the themes of time and memory through urban space in your artworks.
まあでも特にその意識して街を歩いて、例えば香港とかでその記憶とか時間っていうのをある種自分の中のテーマとして歩くってことはまずなくて、まあ普通に歩いて反射的に反応するもの、それに従うっていうのがまあやり方ですよね。例えば街中歩いててなんかでかい煙突なり工場の壁なり、まあ瞬間的に入り込むものってやっぱり自分が所有したくなるっていうかな、そういったものに共通してるのはなんかやっぱりそこに積み重なったなんか表面上のなんか偶然できた自己的な跡だったりね、痕跡だったり記憶なり時間っていうのがやっぱ積み重なってるとは思うんだけど、まあまた話はちょっと戻るけど、やっぱ最初に香港のまだ開拓空港の頃なんですけど、まあ、上空からビルスレスレに飛行機が離着陸する風景を見た時とかっていうのはね、ものすごい、まあ、ここがそれこそ時間と記憶のるつぼっていうかね、まあ、あとやっぱ一番びっくりしたのはやっぱ人が こう生き抜くパワーっていうかな、やっぱそれがやっぱまた東京と比べるとその当時の東京には僕は全く感じなかったっていうかね、だからまあもう香港のがよっぽどインターナショナルだなっていうふうに思ったし、まあその頃はなんか絵の展覧会っていうよりもレコード音を収集してそれをレコード版にするみたいなことを絵の展覧会の前にやってたんで、まあ開拓空港降りて香港のタクシーに乗ってその無線のやり取りがものすごいこう刺激受けたりとか、まあ匂いとか湿気の感じとかね、あとはなんかこう板金屋さんの街中の板金屋さんの音を録音しに行ったりとか、だからまあ音とその絵っていうかこうビジョンがやっぱもう混沌とした中に渦巻いてるような印象があったっていうかな、だからまあ話戻すとやっぱりこう記憶時間っていうのはやっぱその後からこうそういったものを感じるっていうか、だからそれをテーマに作品を作るっていうのはまあ逆になんか危険かなっていうふうには思ってますけどね。
Yeah, I mean, looking at your collages, there are like bus tickets or tram tickets, there are pieces of product packaging, there are images torn from magazines, and you feel a kind of networking or diversity of different times coming together in the work. Murakami-san, I think your practice is fascinating because you're circulating your imagery through urban space in so many different platforms. You are making artworks, but you're also making merchandise. You're doing collaborations with shoe companies and skateboards and different artists as well. What are some of the strategies that you consider when you're working on these projects that you know are going to be circulating in urban space?
Okay. So I have a very good example. So if the Western people want to become to the sumo wrestler, this is very difficult. This is same thing. I am Japanese people, the Asian people, to become to the Western artist is same way. This is the Western the culture has a long history and very original. So Asian people can fit with the Western art is super difficult. It's kind of everything is have to change, like a body and mental and everything, law and communication, everything is changed. But until now, so we didn't Asian, mostly the Japanese art scene is didn't understanding this happening. So why? So I'm wearing for like that, and what you ask me why I have to making for the many platform. I cannot surviving for the sumo wrestler. The yokozuna mean like a champion. I cannot do that. So I am maybe I do my best like a second or third position. This is the best position. That means I cannot making for the championship. So that's why I have to looking for the another way. So that is my reality.
And I mean, I know you've also worked in digital space with NFTs. You are active on Twitter, and you started your own YouTube channel recently. Has the sort of proliferation of digital space and online space in contemporary society changed the way that you approach art and approach the city?
Okay. Very nice, the making for the across the borderline. It's the media is I thought until now I am believe to the cryptocurrency world. Like now the NFT art is not good condition in the economy, but this is a freedom. This area doesn't have any border. Like I told you, I cannot champion in a Western art world. But in a cryptocurrency or like a cyber world, everybody too flat. Like that's why I was very pushing for the NFT something, and until now, so in the end of this year I will release to the new something, to the NFT something. So it's the cyber world and the digital world is a very how can I say democratic area, but same time it's kind of, for example, Japanese government hate and reject for the cryptocurrency area, the culture. So and also the very strong a country is reject for the cryptocurrency. So that is because the freedom, completely freedom. So already started to this cyber world to the making for the art something. So for example, Basel Art Fair is a physical art piece is the move, right? That goes through the dealer. So that is an art market, but the digital something is sometimes doesn't necessary to the dealers. So that is a break everything. That's why art world is still didn't mention for that this is art, but I think this is next, completely next. Like social media is kind of the step 1, step 2, but cryptocurrency is step 10 or something like that. I don't know, but this is my opinion.
Otake-san, I think of you as more of an analog person. You're very, you work with your hands a lot. But have you been paying attention to new forms of digital culture? I remember you were saying the other day that you had actually done a digital project around 2001, 2002, your Mousescape series and works like Bug Layer, where you were working on the computer to make compositions.
そうですね、2001年に今紹介にあったように初めてコンピューターで作品作らないかっていう依頼をいただいて、初めてコンピューターでマウスで絵を描くっていうのを経験したんですけど、単純にだからなんか本末転倒っていうかね、そこが新しいところなんだけど、で最終的にやっぱそこにエディションを入れてくれと。ね、やっぱり版画の歴史っていうのはやっぱりなんていうかな、オリジナル一点じゃないものを複数作ってやっぱたくさんの人に配るっていうね目的があったと思うんだけども、そこにやっぱりエディションを入れるっていうのはやっぱりアナログの世界だと要するにすればするほど銅板にしろ木版にしろ擦り切れていくっていうかな。だから1枚目と同じものを擦れる限界までが大体エディションの枚数のね擦る枚数っていうのを定めてたと思うんだけど、理想を言えば無限に同じクオリティのものが出るっていうのがある種理想であったのに、デジタルっていうそういった最先端の手法を人が手に入れると、そこに逆にリミットをかけていくっていう逆説的なものがあるなと思ったのね。だからそこをね無限に吸って無限にタダで配っちゃえばのがやっぱある種の理想形なわけじゃない。だけどそこにやっぱ枚数を制限してやっぱり銅版画や木版画と同じシステムの中にデジタルをやっぱ組み込んでいくっていうことにすごくなんていうかな、初めて表になんか矛盾が露出したっていうかね、デジタルが使えるようになってね、それはすごく感じましたね。あともう一つは銅版画とか木版画っていうのは平面っていう言い方をしてたんですよね。だから村上さんなんかの前の時代だと立体化平面化みたいな呼び方があって、ペインティングは平面で彫刻は立体みたいなね、デジタルの前って。それ自体がデジタルで その表面がフラットになったことによって木版画とか銅版画の微妙な出っ張り、あと油絵で言えばその油絵の具が平面だった扱いだったのが油絵の具の出っ張りが要するに意味合いが違ってきたっていうかね。だから言ってみれば版画もそのデジタルの作品に比較した場合は版画もペインティングも立体物じゃないかなっていうかね。キャンバス自体が立体物だし、でやっぱデジタルの作品の作画の経験としてやっぱその捉え方がすごくこう発見があったっていうのはありますよね、自分にとってね。油絵の具、キャンバスに描いた油絵の具って立体物だったんだっていうリアリティがあったのはすごく覚えてます。
And I think with your digital works, you ended up cutting them up and making collages out of some of them as well, right?
そうね、そうですね。だから僕の場合はやっぱね、切ってなんか出っ張ってないとなんかこう満足感がないっていうかな、平らだとそういうなんかこうなんていうかな、性分っていうのかな、そういうふうにだから破いて貼りたくなっちゃうのね。そういうのはあるかもしれないですね。だからコラージュなんかもやっぱペインティングと一緒にその紙の厚さがねやっぱ積み重なった立体物ですよね、厳密に言えば。であとはやっぱデジタルの場合は面白かったのは要するに画面をどんどん拡大していくっていうことは絵の中に入っていく感じ。やっぱり絵を描くっていうのは描く距離っていうのが定まってるから、自分が見てると思ってもものすごい接近してみると全く違う世界が自分が作り出したと思ってなかったものがいっぱいあるっていう発見がね、やっぱデジタルのその絵の中に入り込む感覚っていうのがすごく新鮮に覚えてますけどね。
Murakami-san, you, of course, are a master at working on computer and designing your compositions on computer. Could you talk a bit about that sort of interaction between the digital and then what gets the output of your artworks?
It's now is the topics is AI. So until this 15 months is. So we've been trying to using for the AI stuff, but from the audience is against the AI. So this is very surprising. So mostly the film industry people is in Hollywood people is super strong against the AI stuff. So that's why this issue is very sensitive. So, but right now is. I have to thinking about the AI stuff in the digital. So, but honestly, I'm doing very attractive. I employ for the many people.
Right, but in your production process, I think do you sketch ideas and then you put them onto a computer and you kind of develop them through a digital program?
Okay, honestly, I'm not digital people. So I'm making for the very small drawings. So because small drawings can keep the very short time to creative, time, like 6 seconds, 10 seconds. So and then pass to my assistant these sketches, and my design or painting style is we have a theory. That's why making for the tracing for and then. Copying for that, but the AI can be able to immediately to tracing. So my style of thing. So kind of that.
Right. We were talking about the post-war period of Tokyo and the bubble era of Tokyo. I think over the past 20 years or so, we've also kind of reached this period where we have these big real estate developments like Roppongi Hills, which are buying up whole neighborhoods and turning them into sort of commercialized spaces. I wonder if you could talk a bit about whether that's changed the the way art circulates in the city and changed the potential for art making in the city?
Okay. Mori Building, the company, decided to invited to the galleries. This is marketing, not Tokyo thing. So Mori Building marketing thing. So and then I was working with Mori Building. That's why my company moved to the very close with Roppongi. And then very naturally I started the gallery in Azabu. Azabu area is very close from the Roppongi stuff. But I don't know. So I have never thinking about the Tokyo is what. Anytime to thinking about what is Japan. Like Japan has a very big, like Hokkaido to Okinawa. So my theme anytime to came from the south, like a Kyushu Island and Okinawa Islands, and these people is anytime to against to the center of the government. So that the philosophy is I came from the Kyushu Island, the blood. That's why very fit with against the government. So and now maybe you guys watching to the very nicely to the Japanese samurai movie of the Shogun in Disney Plus or something. So that movie is a very fit my feeling, because British or American artist to create for the costume design and architecture, everything is very nicely over the Japanese technique to the making for the what is Japan, what is a Japanese history. So looks like that. That's why I am not focusing for the city or not, right? Kind of, and also my big point of view is Japan has a lot of natural disaster. That's why we have a religion came from the nothing, like just a mirror, like a Shinto way is why is natural disaster is a kind of the God. So thinking about that, but until now, I am not thinking about what is a city. Roppongi is what. Roppongi is Mori Building, the company area, and Mitsubishi, Sumitomo. So it looks like that. I don't know.
Otake-san, I mean, you also have made works like the Japanorama series, where you go out into other cities around Japan and pick up materials from those cities and turn them into artwork. So, I mean, maybe to pick up on what Murakami-san was saying, how do you see this sort of interaction between Tokyo and the rest of Japan?
いや特にないですね。あんまりだから自分がどこにいるかとかってあんま考えたことないし、だからなんかどこでも場所があるところに行くっていうかね、僕の場合はだから仕事場さえあればどこでも行きますって感じなんだけどね。だからなんていうかな、東京ちょっと話それちゃうかもしれないんですけど、東京っていうテーマを聞くとね、さっきの話でやっぱ香港やっぱその当時っていうのは禅とか詫びとかサビとか間の概念とかね、そういうようなテーマの展覧会っていうのが頻繁にジャパンっていうのを打ち出してたと思うんですよ。だけどそういったものっていうのは自分が見ると多分に京都的なんですよね。だからじゃあ京都は素晴らしく感激するんですけど、行くとねそういうのもあるんだけども、じゃあそれが同じ日本で自分の中にあるかっていうと自分の中にはないんですよね。ああいうジャパンっていうのは完璧にアウトサイダーとしてツーリストとして その京都を見てる感覚っていうかな。だからイギリス人ともう例えばロックガーデンとかね、龍安寺とか行くともう 100% 感激するのがなんかつまんないなっていうかね、こういうのに感激するんだっていうかね、ビューティフォーとか言うんだけど、まあ、それはジャパンって言われてもなっていうのがあってね、そういうのはいまだにあって、だからまあその当時だから82年にブレードランナーって映画がねやっぱ出て、あれを見た時に僕の中では谷崎潤一郎の陰影来産っていうのがよく日本の暗闇みたいなのがね、すごく茶室の暗闇なりそういったわびさび的なことを言われるんだけども、自分にとってはブレードランナーがやっぱ陰影来産のなんかこう新しいこうビジョンを突きつけられたっていうかな。だからそういうふうにある種そのリアルなものっていうよりもすごくフェイクなものの中によりこう作品良くなりリアリティをこう見出してたっていうかね、フェイクの方がだから実景を見るよりはお土産屋さんのポストカードの方が絵を描きたくなるっていうような感覚ですよね。それはいまだに同じですよね。だからその美術教育されてた時っていうのはとにかく物を見なさいと、石膏の裏側を感じろとかね、なんできるわけねえじゃねえかとか思ってたりね。だからそういったやっぱ実際に物を見るっていうことっていうのがものすごくこう重要視されてたんだけど、それとはなんか自分は全く真逆だなっていうふうにやっぱその学生時代は思ってましたね。だから東京なんかもそのある種こうリアリティがないっていうかね、だからそれよりも香港のその人がなんかこうぐちゃぐちゃの混沌の中で生き抜いてる現場の方がよっぽどなんかこうアートとは全く関係のないものなのかもないけども、でも実はそこがやっぱすごくこう自分のアートと一番深くつながってるっていうふうに若い頃感じましたよね。
Murakami-san, you just opened a major exhibition in Kyoto that's dealing with the theme of Kyoto. Do you want to respond to what Otake-san was just saying, or carry it forward in some way?
Okay, so my standing position and his standing position is completely different because his standing position is very, how can I say, spiritual thing. So from me, right? Like kind of he's very watching himself. And when we watching his painting or sculptures, it's kind of he against the Zen, the Kyoto style of Zen. But from me, is like my eyes looks like a Western eyes already. His painting is a very Zen style, like nothing to the how can I say, the emptiness. That's why very pure the painting, and I'm very how can I say, jealous for his standing position. So, but my style of thing is looks like exactly the Shogun like production design eye, like how Western people watching to the more booster shot to the Japanese. And then my Kyoto show is exactly the booster by westernized Japanese people to pushing for what is a Kyoto. So and but the many Kyoto local people help me to give me many idea. That's why that show is very very intense. The information from the real Kyoto something. So, kind of that.
I think you've described one of the themes in your art as puking or gero. Could you talk a bit about what you mean when you say that?
Okay, so all right. I now so this talk show. So I told you guys about my marketing, artist side. But, just marketing cannot survive to the art world. So sometime or like many times came from my something to the very honest thing. So when I was making for the first time the puking painting was, I got the gout when I was 36 years old. So my feet is double scale, and I cutting my jeans, and then oh my God, I got a very serious ill. Looks like an elephant, feet, very serious, something like the virus, something. And then I came to the hospital. The doctor said, "Oh, you got a very strange virus." But another 1 week, came back to the hospital. "Oh, sorry, Murakami-san. So this doctor is internship. That's why we're long. So you are the gout." So and then the doctor gave me the pill, and then immediately like shrinking. So that moment is first time to the very serious, watching myself. Oh, I will dead soon. So my body is, aging. So like cannot drink anymore to the beer and alcohol, and cannot eat the shrimp or kind of the, squid or something. So that moment I making for the puking style of the paintings. So it's like just give up. So my icon of the character, Mr. Dove, is give up and say goodbye to this world. So that's why I'm making for the puke images.
Maybe just a last question before we move to questions from the audience. But whether it's in the city, in a city, or whether it's online, what are some of the communities that you feel like you engage with, and where do you go to look for new ideas? Maybe Otake-san, you can start.
いや、俺の場合はないなないやっぱコミュニティみたいなもう完璧に孤立してるっていうかね、だから自分の場合もその東京のこと聞かれても、昔の東京はわかるけどもこの30年間もその宇和島っていう南四国の端の方にずっといるんでね、東京の状況がもう最近のことはもう全くわからないし、なんかそのやっぱコミュニティって意味を正確に捉えてるのか分かんないけども、すごくこう単独行動をずっとしてきて、それがいまだに終わらないっていう意識の方が強いかな、だから自分がその美術界にいるんだっていう感覚がまずないよね、あんまりね。だから本当になんかこうアート関係の人とのつながりっていうのが、昔から今に至って本当に少ないタイプだとは思いますよね。
How about you, Murakami-san?
Honestly, now is best timing in sightseeing in Tokyo. Because season mean like a spring, no, like because very peaceful and very few people to the store. So and yen and dara or I don't know won or something is you knew, right? So many foreigners came to Tokyo and shopping is good, huh? So and eating and the best food, it's kind of can enjoying for anywhere. Very cheap, so that is a good moment for the foreigner. But like lives in Japan, the people is super depressing. So because that salary is stable, like so many English words cannot understanding. So but same time we have a very nice equipment. Like a kind of the touch button, right? Maybe you knew this system in kind of the circle sushi bar, right? So it's and also the art movement is looks like a manga style art is very popular right now, and you can find out that many galleries, mostly the young people can open the galleries. So this is not just from the influence from the New York or London or Paris, but very original movement we have now. So I don't know if this is good or bad, but so who making for the judgment is like you guys, right? So please come to Tokyo and watching your eye and what kind of the making for the your experience. So maybe best timing, but this timing is gone very soon. So I don't know. So we will starting for some war, and the economy is crash, and mostly very dangerous thing is Tokyo has a big possibility to the health earthquake, right? So now is a final moment to. Yes, this is every day I'm thinking about because you can researching for the internet this 1 month every day having a earthquake in a neighborhood in Tokyo. Now if I remember so when 2011 like kind of the north side having Japan has a huge earthquake. We have an event, the Keisai is I invited for the many Western the jury. So, but at the moment is having a earthquake. So my kind of guest is 3 hours have to go around in air, and then cannot touch down in Tokyo to have to go to the Nagoya, Osaka, anywhere. And then, few my guests already, came to Tokyo, and these people is crying because first time to like shaking for the, big something, and I want to go back to, my home. You want to make it for this experience? No, maybe no, right? So now is best timing. Please come. And please spend your money, right? So maybe like we can making a very big, nice, something. But so in the near future, we have to spend the money to renovation for the earthquake. This is our destiny. The Japan has many, huge, disaster. So and then this story in the Shogun. So please, watching the Shogun movie is the best. You understanding for our situation right now.
Okay, let's open it up to questions from the audience. I think we have some people walking around with microphones. Does anybody want to raise your hand high if you want to ask a question? Here in the front.
Though the economy is not very rapid growing now, so how do you think the background in economy things will do the influence to the art world? So how do you think of that? And I am a PR manager of a art gallery in Hangzhou. It's like a very beautiful city in China, and it is has long history. And we have a lot of young artists. They are in a very fresh startup stage. So do you have any advice for them to encourage them or for their career? Yeah.
Okay. Nike say good thing. Just do it, right? That's it. That's it, right? Because I told you today, when I was debut, bubble economy was crashed after that. Economy is disaster. Nobody buy the art. but we were looking for the how surviving. This is nice training. That was a nice training. That's why I'd been long time to can survive in this world. It's bad thing is sometimes good thing, right? Good thing is in the future is bad thing. I don't know. So that's why I just do it.
そうか、僕の場合はですね、なんかふと思い出したのは先日の展覧会で若い女の子が絵を見てくれって言われてスマホを出されたんですよね。いきなりで指先でピッピッピッピッって。だ自分の感覚としてはほらスマホを見てるっていう感覚なんだけど、やっぱその若い子はそれは絵を見せてるっていう感覚なんですよね。でその子がやっぱり悩んでてっていうんでその悩みを喋り出したんですけど、自分の作品をアップしてもいいねがつかないと。でそれを聞いた時にやっぱり自分の場合はいいねが1個ついたら終わりだろうっていうふうに若い頃なんか思ってたね。だからそこら辺がなんかすごくこうね、その人に共感を求める前提になってるっていうのがなんか自分と真逆なんだなっていうか。だからこれはなんか個人的な意見でねアドバイスにはならないかもしれないけど、もう人の意見なんか気にするなっていうかな。だから人に褒められたらダメになったと思えみたいな気持ちで、やっぱ村上さんがこうおっしゃるように just do it っていうかな、ね、やっぱどんどん評価とかそんなことを無視してガンガン作ればいいんじゃないですかね。そんな人の意見なんかどうでもいいっていうかな、逆に褒められたらやばいと思えっていうかな、そういうようなのは自分自身はやっぱ若い頃からは今もあんまり変わらないですよね。
Another question over there in the back. Yeah, right in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Minakami and Mr. Otake. I have a question. So I was wondering, what is the moment when you guys know you are artists, and whether and when are you the most creative, and what is the advice you have for someone who want to become an artist? Thank you.
Okay. I recognize that I'm artist is I was setting for the time limit, so I have to debut before the 30 years old. That's why 29 years old I recognize myself. I'm artist. This is job, right? So and I don't know. And also what is a very creative moment is okay. For example, for example, every day I'm watching to the YouTube or social media. Looks over 5 hours. And then in the studio, maybe my young assistant, just I'm laughing, and I'm just watching to the kind of the iPhone. But when I got the very new idea is something like that time. So watching to the very new word and the stupid like TikTok video. And cat, very cute videos. So I got some idea. Oh, now they're very popular in cat. And then I making for the cat illustration, something like that. Something like that.
僕の場合はやっぱりそのアーティストって意識がすごく薄いっていうかな。だからなんていうかな、いまだにやっぱその自分の考えるアーティストの足元にも及ばない位置にいるっていう思いが強いっていうか、だからなんか自分が何者なのか分かんないままやってて、あんまりそのアーティストだっていう自覚がない ですよね。ただなんか僕の場合はその展覧会のために作品作るっていうのがあんまりなくて、普段から朝起きて、絵を描きたく気持ちになるかどうか、なんか作りたくなる気持ちが起きるかどうかだけで、それがなんかこう1日に2点3点ずつぐらいコンスタントに途切れずできていく時っていうのはすごくこうクリエイティブっていう感覚とは違うのかもしれないけど、調子がいいなっていうふうに思うことはありますよね。だけど要するに自分にとってはやっぱ作品作るっていうのは疑問を分からないことを分かろうとする手段っていうのがあって、だから疑問が消えない限り作り続けてるっていうかな。だからそれがアートであろうがアートでなかろうがあんまり自分にとっては意識しないっていう感じですね。
Murakami-san, you of course work with other artists through Kaikai Kiki, and you also you actually helped launch the careers of some now established artists through your Geisai festival. So maybe you could just add a little bit about how you work with other artists. Do you give them a lot of advice, or are you pretty hands-off?
I want using for the translator. Okay. 僕若いアーティストを、15年ぐらいサポートしてきたんですけど、若い人はやっぱり年を取った連中がやっぱ目障りなんで、最終的にはこういう感じなんですよね。それでもう一生懸命お金かけて育ててもそうなっちゃうんでギブアップしました。
Well, that's all the time that we've got. So thank you for your questions, and thank you to Murakami-san and Otake-san for such a stimulating discussion. I'd just like to remind everyone, drop by the pop-up AWT bar at Ronin tonight and tomorrow, anytime from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. You can experience a taste of Art Week Tokyo through special artist cocktails while listening to artist-curated playlists and seeing select artworks presented by Art Week Tokyo Galleries. And Art Week Tokyo's 2024 edition kicks off with 2 days of VIP events in Tokyo on November 5 and 6. I'd also like to thank our interpreters for today. Our Japanese-English interpreters were Mary Joyce and Tomoko Momiyama, and our Mandarin Chinese-English interpreters were Amy Ho and Michael Chen. Otsukaresama deshita. Thank you.